good to give a few moments. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, this new mic headset, and it's been acting kind of weird. It's cutting in and out, so I might have to return it, but we'll see. We'll see how it holds up. All right, just get a few more minutes. We're gonna let some more people join here. All right, looks like we got most of y'all. All right, let's go and kick this off here. Hope y'all are having a good night, evening, such. Let's go. I'm gonna start sharing my screen and kind of jump right into the presentation. And then we'll have a follow-up or like questions afterwards if y'all have anything. And if you kind of want to jump into the presentation, like with a quick comment or just a quick thing, I'm pretty comfortable with that as well, as long as it's real short, and then we'll just kind of carry on to the next slides. Oops, let's get back here. There we go. Makes a little more sense. Okay, so tonight's feature talk is pretty much going to be just how to become a QA engineer in general in about 6 months. So try to give you all some of the know-how, little tricks in the industry that I've learned and what I've kind of fumbled through, and just going through different interviews and kind of these little things I've gained along the way, and hopefully I can pass them on to you all and kind of give you all an idea of how to get where you need to go to become a QA engineer. So look at, first of all, learning the skills needed to become a QA engineer, just really honing into these skills that are required of you to be in this position, and how to differentiate yourself from other applicants, how to really stand out compared to those. Those are some of the things that we're gonna learn, these different skills to get you in that type of position to really differentiate yourself. Foremost, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Matthew Chadwell. If you weren't on the first instruction that I provided in a previous meeting, I'm a quality assurance engineer and also an instructor. My experience consists of 4 years of product training and over 5 years in QA testing as quality assurance engineer. And I've tested on web and native mobile applications and hardware and software alike. The industries that I've been in throughout my career have been in the IoT, the ranching industry with IoT technologies, and smart home industry within IoT technologies, and also in satellite communications and the sports industry. So, they range, is pretty differentiating industries within there that I've had the opportunity to work. work in. I've gathered a few pictures, kind of like a little collage from the projects that I've worked on throughout my career thus far. Some of these images will show, here, just go through too much in depth with them, but like for instance, testing on mobile devices, emulators, emulations to test these mobile devices from the laptop. The sports industry, worked with A&M on their sports page and like working with some of their contributors and sports ticket purchases, stuff like that. So testing their web application. That's one of the things I performed. Here to the third picture at the top, working basically on these IoT sensors. So plugging them in and making sure we're getting the right reading as far as like temperature sensors. They also had other sensors involved too as well, water sensors, and we pretty much made sure that these devices were working properly. Our samples that we got into the to the company. So basically testing to make sure the messaging was coming across from the sensors. And then our programmers had written some stuff too as well to take those messages and kind of like transform them, type the strings and values that we needed for our program. So making sure that our programmers were setting up their programs correctly. We also had satellite devices here, which we tested, and mobile devices to make sure that our connections, we had some mock connections where we connected to these satellite devices to make sure we were able to make calls back and forth, basically using these satellite devices like Wi-Fi routers in an instance there. So we can make communication between each other, between mobile devices. So we did some testing there, and then also setting up like QA environments, which you have the Ubuntu here, which is like a Linux flavor. So that's those are the things in QA you'll run into as far as testing and testing mobile devices using emulators, and then also setting up your QA environments. So those are some of the important things that I came across down my journey of becoming a quality assurance engineer, all the way from associate quality assurance engineer, and then kind of moving up to a quality assurance engineer. So to sum it up real quick, like the way the industry is right now and what I've seen so far, and the jobs out there, and the salaries, everything seems to be, the demand seems to be really strong for QA engineers right now. And it looks like that's not going to be a dying trend. It's not a boom or something that's going to fizzle out. There's really a value in this having QA engineers part of your organization. The products created by the developers need to be tested and verified and validated by an outside party in a sense, which would be a QA engineer, although you're working alongside. So it's really an important job to have to verify and validate what the developers have put out there and test to make sure it's working accordingly. So it's huge demand. There's a huge demand out there for the QA engineers, and then especially to have the opportunities QA engineer. You'll get these opportunities to work in these growing industries, the really hot industries right now, for instance, the audio and video communication industry, all the communication that we got going on as far as remote learning and remote work. There's a ton of applications that are being created and need some testing there. The IoT for fitness, healthcare, automotive, and for instance, like the IoT that I dealt with was working with the ranching industry. That's a really hot field there that's needing quality assurance. And then we've got AR, VR needs, and gaming. There's a ton of companies out there hiring for QA, like Zynga. Zynga's frequently has QA posts out there for a job post, looking for people to test on their games. So, and there's other companies too, as Rooster Teeth and some other ones. So in a high level description of a quality assurance engineer, I'm pretty sure most of y'all know what a quality assurance engineer is by now, but the engineers plan, create, and conduct tests before and after product launches. And it's just not just before the product launches. You also have to do testing while the software applications is in production, so to make sure it continues to work as intended, and then also testing up to new to the release of new products as well. The QA engineer's job is to ensure the software meets the client's needs and the intended functionality. So that is, basically just making sure that you're keeping the user in mind when you're writing test cases and testing these products. And then also according to the requirements that are out there, making sure that what was built by your company is working as intended. So here's some basic steps to become a QA engineer. And I pretty much boiled them down to just 3. They kind of expand within their own bounds, but for instance, the step 1 is to acquire the necessary knowledge to become a QA engineer. You learn from the experienced people in the field. Looking at seniority, I go to different QA meetups and I talk to some people, some friends and different people here at the coffee shop, around the coffee shops that have been out in the field for a long time. And I tend to get my answers quicker, and I can kind of bounce my ideas off of them, and seems to kind of speed up my, my learning curve. And then the hands-on experience is a big one. It's a huge one. And then learning from other students is very valuable as well. So being in a class setting and then having a conversation with other students and also, and learning from the instructor, those 2 are extremely valuable. And the second step is to begin networking early, kind of how I mentioned with the meetups. So as soon as possible, get yourself into some either like local meetups or remote meetups. You can join these QA meetups from around the country, around the world right now. COVID, some bad things about COVID that happen. There's some good things that happen, and definitely allows you to remote into these QA meetups and join some conversations and learn quite a few things. And the step 3 is practice mock interviews and tests. So when the opportunity does present itself, you are ready for those interviews. So kind of get into the knowledge, just give you a basis here. One of the most important things to start off with is obtaining the knowledge is the QA process. And this is something you definitely need to learn to get into this profession. Software testing is not just a single isolated activity. It's testing. Most people that are getting into these new fields or kind of learning about QA kind of see it as just a testing role. It's actually consists of a series of activities needed to help certify software products. So you need to learn these different activities, and they each have their own completion status. So each step that you complete in these series of activities will lead you to the next step in essence. So you need to ensure the software quality goals are met. That's the big thing of all, the most basic thing. So from this, you need to learn the phases of the software testing lifecycle to get this knowledge. And that's the strategizing, the planning, the test case design, the execution of the test cases, how they're executed, and what you're going to execute in there. It's all from the planning, and then the execution, the actually final execution of that, and then getting the report from that, and then the completing of the test cycles after the execution. Basically, again, seeing what your results are from the execution. The next part of the knowledge is the what to test. Quality is not an afterthought. It should be baked in right from the start. You're going to attend meetings with cross-functional teams, like, for instance, the UX team, the developers, the product owner. So you're pretty much baked in, your position's baked in right from the start, the understanding of the product. So that's basically the understanding of the user stories, the acceptance criteria, basically what's accepted or what's expected from the client. And you're going to study the requirements from a testing point of view to identify testable requirements. So you need to understand from what they're asking, what you can test and quantify. So basically, you're going to need to learn how to analyze and write test cases from the acceptance criteria. That is something that's very important in a role of being a QA engineer. And then also, you need to organize and be able to organize and report your findings from your test cases, kind of going back to the executing of the test cases and into the test cycles. mentioned previously. So you're going to categorize these test cases and group the test cases based on their prioritization. You're going to assign the priority to each test case. And you got to know how to do that. Also, the type of the test case, software feature, software features, if it's a feature that's expected, that's focused in by what the development's doing as far as part of the requirements. You're going to need to organize these specifically to that feature if that's what you're intending to focus on for that group of tests. And then also what you're going to do is you're going to manage the test progress. So you could have a team of other testers, and you want to make sure that you're hitting the goals previously set during planning to get the most coverage out of testing these products and softwares. So you need to learn about the test case management and some of the test case management tools, just being familiar with them. The second part of organization and reporting is pretty much using jira and tracking some of these issues and different features in development. The developers will be tasked with something during a sprint, and during this sprint it may be like a feature that needs to be implemented into a project. As a QA person, you can go in there, or really anybody that has access to Jira, but you want to go in there and you can manage the progress of their tickets and also see when they're done with these features, so that you know when you can start testing these test cases that you made prior to the feature being completed. And also for your own task. So not only is the task for the developers to complete their features, QA also will throw their task into the ring of the sprint and commit to things that they need to complete. So let's say there's a feature that's coming out and a new user story and requirements and acceptance criteria based off of what the client is looking for is put out there. And so QA will put out a task in Jira to state that they will write test cases, come up with test cases as a group for that type of new feature. And to write the test cases, you'll often put a certain type of duration or time that you'll need to test this. So this kind of keeps track of how much time that you're dedicating during a sprint, which a sprint can last a week, 2 weeks. It just depends on the project where it's at. And so we want to make sure that you're able to prioritize and pretty much put how much time that you're willing to or you're going to have available to test these and write test cases for these features. And you also want to put out different tasks out there to show like how long it'll take you to test something to run these tests too as well. Another important thing, extremely important thing, is the reporting of bugs found during testing and the way that you the formality of writing these bugs. So you'll put a bug ticket in Jira, and this will pretty much put a flag out there to show the developers that you found a bug, and that you want to put as much information in that bug that's helpful to the developer to understand where this bug was found, what things led up to this bug. And so that is an important thing to become a QA engineer, is to know how to write these bugs strategically and like the proper way to do it. You'll have developers out there looking, and they will definitely have some pushback against a bug that is not written properly. So you'll need to learn about Jira tickets and how to report bugs and the best practices as a QA engineer. The next valuable thing of knowledge that you'll have to attain here is test coverage. It is difficult, if not impossible to test everything intended. Use different test types and test selection to get the desired test coverage. That's what you'll need to do. Strategically select valid and invalid endpoint data for your test cases. Just quick note, the valid or the invalid is more of the unhappy path or negative testing. There's a side note there. So you're going to have to learn about these different test types in order to get the coverage that you need when when you're testing your application. So you can use different things like smoke, API testing, regression testing, sanity testing. These are all the different types you're going to have to be familiar with. And then you got to learn about the different input selection strategies. In the prior talk given, we had talked about boundary value analysis. There's other strategies and different things you can use for input selection. And this is about being smart about your test data that you're going to use for your test cases. Because, time is of the essence and time is extremely important. So you want to reduce the cost of having to test a large amount of test data if you can. And this is so you can get as much test coverage as possible with the test data that you formulate and come up with. So kind of learning these strategies like the boundary value analysis, pairwise, and the state transition. Those are some of the things you're really going to have to, they're extremely important. And, the times that I've been in interviews with employers, their ears perk up when you do mention some of these things. So that they'll definitely give you an edge in the interview process. And
excuse me, I have a quick question. What's the difference between smoke and sanity testing? Can you please explain?
Yeah, so smoke is generally their test, I'll say is really high point of view. It's to test to make sure that the application, the very basic and core parts of application can pass before you really dive deeper and start running your other test cases. So you'll definitely, you'll want to test the core functionality before diving deeper and doing such things as like unhappy path testing, using invalid data entry points. Like for instance, if you were to log in, you leave like a username empty and then selecting login and expecting like an error message. So those will be the lower priority things. So you would want to test in a smoke test just to make sure that the basic core functionality is being met before you start running a large test suite or test group. And then sanity is just that's basically something to check just to make sure that the also the core things is as well. And that's more towards the end of the testing to make sure something that's kind of like towards production ready almost.
Thank you.
The web application testing and the client side, this is very, very valuable because most of y'all might end up in a place where you are doing some, well, you most likely are going to end in an area where you're going to do some web application testing. So the client side is kind of like the what you see, so when you go to a website, the different elements and such, those are the things you're going to click and make sure the GUI is working, this graphic user interface, just to make sure the very basics are working there from the end-to-end testing. So you got to have the knowledge of the HTML elements themselves and the attributes of the web page. When you're selecting these different elements, you'll refer to them as well when you're reporting bugs or different tickets. So it's good to have an idea of what the HTML element naming and attributes are for reporting purposes, and also accessing the error logs from the web browser. So if you were to click on something and it didn't work within the web browser, you can troubleshoot it by looking in a console. And that's all built into the web application itself, or in the web browser itself. They have a developer tools where you can get in there and be able to see if there's any JavaScript errors or different errors in the web application. Make sure, if something didn't load properly, you can dig up some of the errors and copy those and attach them to a bug report and troubleshoot kind of what's going on. And also from the developer tools, you can simulate the performance on a slower network. So you can pretty much like simulate in a way 2G or 3G, and then go into the web application and kind of use it as a user would, and see how it performs under these slower network connections. And that way you can tell if it was designed properly to be able to handle the slow loading, stuff like that. And that comes in real handy. Like if there's images they're supposed to load, like how does the developer handle a case where an image is larger or some sort of content is a little heavier than others, and being able to load this when you have a slower network, and how this is handled. Is a message provided to the end user, or is there some sort of box or some sort of name that's shown for that element that's supposed to be loading? So just kind of like a user experience. So it's going to be really important. It provides a lot of value to know how to use the browser developer tools from the web browser. Another thing that's extremely important and very, very valuable, when I first got into testing, I was working with web applications, and I was becoming familiar with the HTML elements and attributes, and we had no code automation, which was pretty much selecting these elements, and then kind of like a flow of select this, enter input, and then had an expectation for the output. This was all recorded within a program. So we just had to play it at night when we ran our test, and it would give us the results, and we kind of take the results in the morning and create bugs off of it and such. But there's going to be times where you need to access like a server for your company and get the logs that way, which look at the different servers. I was giving an instance, like if you're not too familiar with what the servers, like the popular operating systems on servers being used, giving an instance kind of bounce off of what you kind of know, or you might know, or you should know already, but we'll look at Windows. Windows is the most popular operating system for desktop PCs. I know you'd think it's probably like Mac, but the world's most popular OS for the internet's web servers is Linux. And the servers are just basically Linux, Unix operating systems. And you'll see that there's, you got your graphic user interface here with Windows. And then you'll see here in your Linux that this is more of like a command line interface over here, where you can just do direct commands, and then you'll get just basically text-based information back to you, rather than a graphic, some sort of graphic back to you. And this makes it lightweight for these servers as well. So they're not handling all these graphics like a Windows would, right? It's a real basic operating system. So to be able to access a server, access the logs from these servers. For instance, if your server was to crash that your web application is running off of, you may be tasked to go into the server and access these crash logs. Go in there and see the system logs, and be able to grab these error logs or debug logs, however set up by the developer. Or you may be able to see the health of this server. You could run a simple command such as top and see the resources being used for the server, and see if it's running kind of hot. If there's also the memory's running high, you may have a memory leak or something like that. So there's different things you can check the health of the server from the command line. So you don't need to go too deep into that. It's just basically understanding the very, very, very basic commands that you can run in the server to get the information that's needed. And so you can see here, I have a little learn area. So learn the basic, most commonly used commands. And so you don't have to set up your own server. For instance, here that this is Ubuntu, it's a flavor essentially of Linux. You could practice on this site right here, cocalc.com, and it's basically a Linux terminal. They can't mess up your own computer. So if you wanted to go in there, you can run commands or learn commands online. And also in this course, I'm going to be teaching some very, very basic commands, just enough to get you around the server to be able to grab the logs that you need to get, or different and be able to navigate as well through the different files, and kind of get you where you need to go as far as a QA engineer, the basics to start with. And over time, you'll learn more as it goes, but this will definitely get you, it'll provide a big advantage for your interview process to let them know that you have the basic understanding of working with command line. Another thing that we're gonna, that's very, very essential and very, it's a big bonus to know when you're going to interview for a QA engineer position, is API testing. It's basically sending the data to the server, to the endpoint URL, and then retrieving some sort of like, it's a JSON back, a text back, and you can basically just do a get or a post or get to grab this data back and be able to look through it and see if you're getting the correct response from the server. And also posting your own information to the server as well. And the type of codes that you will get back from the server to make sure that everything's working as intended and that you're getting a successful completion of that response. And also you've posted information correctly. It's being correctly posted to the server, and these codes will give you that information to make sure, these status codes, to make sure that the information is going through correctly. So you'll learn how to make these calls. You need to learn how to make the calls through, well, there's different ways you can do it. You can do it from the command line just by putting in a straight command into the server, typing one in, or you can use, there's a GUI based one. It's like a Postman, which we have here. And here you can actually perform a API call to the server as a get to get the resources. And you'll see a URL right here at the top. Basically, we're doing a get for these list of users from this website, JSON placeholder .typecode.com. So you'll run that, and then you'll get the expected users back from the server. And this is all, your expectations of what you need. It's all detailed in the requirements that you have for your for the application under test. And I would say that this is back kind of like going with the smoke test. This is usually used, this API testing. It's kind of hard to get your head wrapped around what API testing is in the beginning, but you'll get the concept the more you dig into it, and the more you run these try to get the responses from the server. So looking back at the smoke test, which we were kind of talking about previously, these API tests will usually be run as a smoke test to make sure that you're just getting the response, the basic, you're getting the basic information back from the server that is needed. And it's a lot faster because, let's say, for instance, you're testing a web application. It's pretty expensive as far as time goes wise to, let's say if you're to log in, you're to click the username, or you access the URL, and then from the home page, there'd be like a login area. You enter in the username, let's say it's a login area, and on the home page, and you enter in the username, the password, press enter, and then you expect for it to maybe bring up a message or redirect you to a different page, right? You can do pretty much the login, making an API call to the server, and then just making sure you get you have an expectation of a status, like for instance, like a 200, which is successful. This would be like a successful status code returned, and then you can pretty much verify that you were able to log in. And you can do this all just by doing a straight API call to the server rather than doing it through the web application itself. So with the smoke testing, you could run these API calls straight to the server and get your status code. And you could have a series of these API calls and make sure you get successful callbacks as far as like the status codes is 200 or an expected body of information that you're looking for before you even start doing your web application testing. And that's something that can be automated pretty easily. So usually QA will use that as some sort of like, it'll be like a smoke test. They'll run all their API calls before they start getting into the graphic user interface to test it there. So it's kind of like, let's see if everything's working. Let's see if the server's providing the information we need back from our request. And then you can go into the graphic side of it and make sure that when you are logging in, it is bringing to the URL and those graphics are showing. And, you know, and if you're doing like some sort of negative testing, that the invalid's bringing back. So we talked a little bit about the knowledge section, the importance of the knowledge, getting the knowledge to get a position in QA, a QA engineer position. And the second step here was the start networking. I really highly suggest that you join a meetup group. There's remote, like I was mentioning previously, there's remote meetups, you have local meetups. You can pretty much jump into the conversations with any of these presenters from these meetups. Don't be shy. Get out there and ask them questions about what they're presenting, and also different questions you have about different QA processes or different strategies, and just showing that you're curious about the field. And the thing is, when you are talking to these professionals, it's good to have an idea about the terminology and the different things, the knowledge you can learn. For instance, like in the courses here, they'll give you the knowledge that you need to kind of know to be able to have these conversations comfortably, and kind of get you in a jump start to really make these connections with these professionals. And it's quite common for employers to join these meetups as well. They'll tell you right in the beginning, hey, we're looking to hire a QA engineer for this, an automation engineer for this. And so just spending some time and without even having the knowledge right now, I'd really suggest just getting there into the QA meetups and learning what you can, and just kind of messaging people so they know who you are. And then the more you learn about the field, you can jump in there and start asking some pretty good questions and developing the relationships and professional relationships with these people. So that's a really, that's extremely, that's kind of how I got my start. I went to a meetup and I met a gentleman there, and I was into a little bit of programming, not much, it was real basic. And I had talked to him quite a few times, and eventually QA spot opened up, and he asked me if I wanted to do some manual testing for his company. So it did take a little while to develop the relationship and show him that I knew, basically the right terminology or some of the understanding of the programming, to the point where, he approached me one day and said, hey, we have a QA engineer manual position. Would you like to come to our company and start working? Preparing for interviews was kind of the third point to make sure that you're ready to get into the QA engineer field. And that's when you are approached, you will be able to meet that opportunity. Like if you're at the meetups or wherever else you're talking to other professionals, that opportunity will come about, and then they will ask you to come in for an interview. So just making sure you've prepared thoroughly, practicing mock interviews, doing QA candidate assignments. There's tests out there. There's different things that you can kind of prepare for, or work on to prepare for these interviews. Let's see if I can actually. So I actually attached a QA candidate assignment here that for one of my previous companies I worked for, just kind of show you an idea of the different things you can work on as far as these different assignments and tests. And there's a few example ones on the online, but I kind of wanted to provide a real life scenario one that from one that I was given to work at a company. So this is my QA candidate assignment. It says here, thank you for applying to join the QA team at Jackrabbit Mobile. The written assignment is designed to measure your ability to write tests and discover hidden defects and a simple mapping web app. So they're going to give you an example situation or example product in these questions, and it's really just to see how analytical you are and what type of defects you can find and what type of test cases you could build off of the requirements for the product. And based off of acceptance criteria, they may give you user stories from a client. They want to see how you think and what you can test and what you can come up with for your test. And they want to see if you can find bugs for them. They want to see what type of quality you can provide to their team by increasing the quality of their product. And I won't go through this whole thing, but this is, for instance, this top right here. He's pretty much saying that the client has come forward with this user story for their product that they're wanting. As a user, I would like to add a location pin by typing in a coordinate. And this is for this mock application, Save the Spot Roku app. I don't know what that is, but he's got that application, and this is what the client, for instance, what they want to do. They want to have this user story, and they have this acceptance criteria as well below it. That's expectations of what they want that application to do. And from this acceptance criteria, like for instance, this is basically what the user wants. As a user, I would like to add a local pin by typing in a coordinate. So that's kind of broken down to user can type in a latitude and longitude point. Coordinate is permanently persisted when the user clicks add. These are kind of like the behaviors that are desired from that user story broken down. And so what was in this assignment here was the purpose of the assignment was to take these acceptance criteria and build test cases off of them, and then write them, and then also use the test cases to go to the application and find bugs. So it's just that type of analytical type of thinking that you kind of need as a QA person. So it's just practicing them and making sure that you can come up with different cases for a product that are kind of like thinking outside the box of what could a user do with this product, what is needed based off of what the client is looking for. One of the promises and things, and we're pretty much wrapping up to the end here, is when you're starting your, you're going to start your journey with a position in QA and tech. It promises a lot to you. There's a lot of promises for you out there. It's, being a QA, QA engineers have a broad and flexible career path. Basically, you can branch off into other positions just by being in QA. You also, you make the connections within organizations with different departments, working cross-functionally. For instance, with project managers, UX designers, developers, the sales engineers, other QA people in other positions, such as the automation team. You get to know them, and you learn quite a bit for them as well. And just different things you can bounce off too. Just being a QA engineer. The knowledge from working in different industries you can get into a project manager over time if you would like to. The QA experience of testing products with the user experience in mind can move you into a UX designer position. And then if you want to become a developer over time after being a QA engineer, you can learn about the working approach from developers while working in QA. That's kind of that teaming up with developers and just kind of seeing how they work and their flow. And you're a part of a lot of the Scrum meetings, a lot of different meetings with these developers. So you're able to see the architecture and lots of different parts of the program. So it's really neat to be a part of QA. There's sales engineer position. You basically learn a lot of technical skills along the way too as a QA engineer. And that could be applied to running different demos for customers, stuff like that. And then also the automation engineer team. I worked quality assurance as a quality assurance person for a while as an associate, and then moving into a quality assurance engineer role, and then now going into a quality assurance automation role. It was a lot of learning and a lot of teamwork with other people within my department, and the QA audit, and people really open up to you and they'll teach you a lot. I've learned quite a bit of automation from our automation group. So there's a ton forward. It's starting your journey with QA is definitely, I think it's the best entry point. It's the easiest entry point into the tech industry, and definitely the preferred right now. It's kind of wrapping that up and looking at like the different, the knowledge that you need and the experience. The PASV manual testing course begins early March. So if this is something that you'd be interested into and you want to learn more from myself, and not only that, learn from other students within the class, which is really important, a very valuable part of it, the part of the program, and then also receiving a certification so you can put that on your resume, and really getting the tools ready for, when you do your networking, you're ready to present them and show your skills and get into a QA engineer position. So basically the dates and all the different details, you'll need to reach out to the sales manager to get more information on that. I don't know how many spots are open, but it's definitely something to ask a little bit early on. Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and sum it up there and see if you all have any questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
So when you say it's not possible or very difficult to perform all the tests, does that mean the backlog never gets cleaned out?
I'm sorry, what was, one more time the question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, you said so. To perform all the tasks, is it difficult to clear out the backlog over time?
Yeah, if there is a test plan intended, and you said it's almost impossible to perform all the tests intended, does that mean the backlog always contains some test cases that are never performed?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, it's a strategy, right? Like over time and planning, you need to just make sure, based on your resources, your technology, and your know-how within your department, what test cases need to be tested within a sprint's time to cover what's most important according to like the business requirements.
Got you. So that leads me to another question. Does that mean a sneaky bug can come out, can make it to the final build?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah?
it can, but the thing is that you don't want the sneaky bug to come up and really hamper the experience. So if there's something that a client is really expecting out of the software, the application, or the web application, you'll want to make sure that those are covered, like what their expectations are, the highest of expectations. So the core elements.
And the other question is then, if the backlog is created this way, if the entire test plan is created, just the way it's intended, why is it never performed all the way? So it's like, is this the problem of resources, or like management, or what's the main issue for that?
Yeah, I mean, there is not so much of an issue. You're going to want to do as much testing as possible and cover as many scenarios. So for instance, like the case that you're mentioning here, let's say there's a large backlog of bugs, and let's say they're all important, right? You're going to, there's ways to handle these type of tests and test around features that may have had bugs earlier, or previous features that were tested past, but new features have been built. And maybe these new features have broke the old features. So you have like a regression testing.
Okay.
To make sure, that everything's being tested properly. But what the industry, what a lot of companies are doing now is they're finding out ways to automate the regression testing. And so you can automate the regression, and then if you have new features being created, you could prefer for those things to be manually tested. So there's certain things, like there's core elements of a a web application or software that need to be tested and likely not to change throughout the life of the project. Those things you can automate. It takes energy to automate and script them. But if things are fast moving like they are in an agile management type of environment, then some things are meant to prefer to be manually tested. So to cover a ton of test cases that you typically could not, companies are resorting to automating those tests for the regression.
Speaking of agile environment, it sounds like that everybody's in a rush. As always, there is, the deadlines are never met, and there is not enough resources to perform everything. Is that true? Most of
Yes,
the time.
it's very fast moving. You're getting new features in, and development is broken down into new features and new parts of features, new requirements weekly. And so what you're trying to do is when these, to move fast with agile, you need to be building test cases and preparing for the new features as soon as possible. So as soon as the user stories come in and they're broken down into requirements, acceptance criteria, the QA engineers have to immediately start building test cases. This is how you kind of keep up with the speed of agile, is you're always preparing for the new features.
What do
And
they call
testing deal.
sprints, huh? Everybody's running, huh?
Yeah, everybody's
Is that why
running.
they
It's
call sprints?
yeah, pretty much. It's a week, 2-week sprint, and you're moving. And at the end of the week, you're going to determine where you're at.
Last
been
question
developed and
now.
what's
What's
been
the
tested.
difference? Sorry, what's the difference between a QA associate and a QA engineer? The way you would explain it.
Yeah, so the way I explain it, the tiers, a lot of companies have their own titles. So the way that I've seen it in the majority of the companies is that you start out like there's a title as, for instance, like a manual tester, or they'll call them as associate, a QA engineer. So the beginning, you do a ton of manual, and you are you're also just learning a lot about the position itself. And then after that, once you get higher like acumen, you can show the skills to be able to maintain a QA environment, or maybe some simple automation, or being more involved in the planning process. So
How long do you think would it take to get up to speed from a QA associate to a QA engineer position?
It's not long at all. That's what's kind of neat about this, about the quality assurance positions. Like manual gives you you can get your foot in the door pretty easily, just by showing some of your knowledge and your skills, and some of the stuff you do hands-on outside, right? Like messing with the command line, doing API calls, API tests, and just having the terminology will get you in the manual pretty quickly. People need help with manual. Manuals, there's a big need for that. But moving up to the next position, like a QA engineer, it took me about a year. So, but it was a lot of like staying after and working with the other QA engineers and developers and learning.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can I ask you something?
Sure. This is Alex.
Yes. What tools do you use as a automation QA engineer, like to automate your test cases?
Yeah. So worked mainly with Python and Selenium. So testing the application, the GUI, for instance, like the customer-facing side of it, the client-side part of it. So just running those tests, checking for the elements and inserting the input values and making sure the behavior, the expected behavior occurs. And then also as far as like API testing, you like for instance, like a position in QA quality engineer, just starting off the bat, you can make these API calls relatively easy and just kind of like learn the concept of it. But you within Postman was that GUI, the Postman GUI that we were talking about earlier. There you can actually run some automation and run those back to back without having to type in the URL and the information that you need from the server, or you're trying to post to the server, or just with the URL to get every time, and pressing actually the button to submit that to the server. Within Postman, you can run those back to back, or run in an order. Like if you want to post the information and then you want to do a get information. So I'm posting maybe something to the database, like I could post some information about a cat's name, and then the server will take that information, put it in its database, and I'll do a get on the server to say, oh, what cats have been, are on this server that's been saved to this server. The server will have it maybe in a database. And when I do my get to the server, it'll respond back to all the cats that are entered. Now you can do those in a sequence and just run it. So you can save you can save your post call, your get call, and then basically run that, and it'll run them all in the order that you need. So that's a form of automation of the API testing on the server. So using Postman itself, there's an area where you can actually set up the automation. So doing application testing with Selenium and Python, and then using Postman to do the API testing.
Okay, thanks for your answer.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. Is Artem?
Yes.
Artyom?
Yes. When you said the developers use pictures or videos that are too big, and when you test, is there any test that you can use to know the speed of the internet of the user? You know what I mean? For example, one user going to have slow internet, and when you test, is there any way to like a program to use to slow down the internet somehow, and to know how fast, how slow we're going to open the application?
Yeah, you can actually do that within like for instance, like you could do that right within the Chrome browser. So there's a developer tool that you can select there it's on the right side of the screen. There's like a little hamburger menu in the top right corner.
Okay, and you slow down and set up the speed of the internet up there?
Yeah, you could select the network connection. So you kind of like you're kind of mocking it in a way.
Oh, okay.
And you can do that because the thing is that to be QA, the big value that QA brings to the table is that you think from the user's perspective, right? There's a lot of developers. I have friends that are developers too, and they're saying, hey, we don't need any QA. We'll create a unit test and we'll test our code, and it'll work as intended. But the problem is that within Agile, you're moving so quick. They're developing these features within a tunnel. They got the tunnel vision, and and they get the features completed. But it's just like having the outside party that and QA has a ton of knowledge on the product. I mean, you're going to know a ton of you're going to know everything about the product, where developers might only know certain sections because that's their focus. So you as a tester, you bring a ton of value to that. And so getting back to the network speed, that's another thing of thinking from a customer. What speed? Maybe they're running out of data, right? They have data restriction because they're over their data cap. So there's different things, and it can hinder how their performance is, and they're not going to blame it on their phone. They may their service. They're going to blame it on the application.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes probably the developers are going to think that the application, for example, looks beautiful because of some other features, but it's too heavy, right?
Yeah,
So
they're gonna test it in supreme conditions, right? The best conditions.
Yeah.
And so this thing, it takes a lot of energy to test from a user standpoint, and test the maybe if there's any unintended consequences of the feature being developed.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is there any questions? Alrighty, I'm gonna wrap this up if there's not any more questions, and we'll just kind of complete this off for the evening. Thank y'all all for joining. Look forward to join the course with PASV, and could teach you a ton and like really show you. I mean, I've learned so much in my profession. Along the way, I've stumbled quite a bit, and picked up the information I wish I would have had in the very beginning. I'd like to share that with y'all and kind of get you that jump start that will get you in a QA position, what these employers are looking for.
And are you the course instructor?
I will be the course instructor for, starting early March. So, and also what I plan for the course is that once again, we're going to have the students. I like to be very interactive, and I want everybody to learn off of each other as well with the presented material. I believe that provides a ton of value in itself.
Cool. Thank you guys. So see you on the first lesson.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye bye.
I'm gonna take care.
You too.